So welcome back, everybody. Shabbat is coming. You can sort of feel it. It's been a long week. But this is going to be a very special session. Everybody knows Naya. She's going to present. The title of her talk is "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew? Teaching Methods for Anti-Semitism." Naya did her PhD at UCLA. Has been an outspoken voice of reason and fighting anti-Semitism in the media and academia. And she does curriculum development at Ramaz in the Israeli-Arab conflict, and I suspect the related issue of anti-Semitism. So thanks for being here. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm actually going to stand because I like to teach with my students, all right? So the title of this talk actually came from the title of my class that I taught. It's called "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew?" And please feel free to take pictures, totally okay. And it's going to be interactive, all right? So when I ask a question, I actually want you to answer that question. So I'm going to move through my slides. So I really want to begin with a roadmap to tell you where I'm going. The first is I want to very briefly examine traditional conceptualizations on anti-Semitism and how those concepts have informed the pedagogy of this topic. The second thing I want to actually do is model a lesson for you today. And the third, if we really have the time, is why the Jews? Why do we teach about anti-Semitism at all? I want to say that I predominantly work with Jewish students. So that's important as we talk about methods and context. I don't speak with non-Jewish audiences mostly. Mostly I speak with Jews. All right. So when I started thinking about teaching about anti-Semitism, this was around 2016, 2017, and I was wondering what's out there. And I was kind of scanning academia, and there really wasn't much in terms of academic, institutions or fields devoted to anti-Semitism. What there was legacy organizations such as the ADL or the AJC that offered, programs to come in and teach about anti-Semitism. And take a look at some of these programs. No Place for Hate, Fighting Intolerance, and then there was this very famous program that they ran called the Pyramid of Hate. And I attended many of these workshops. How many of you have ever attended any of these workshops? All right. And I found that a big problem was that they universalized the Holocaust. They universalized anti-Semitism to such a degree, and I really believe that anti-Semitism is a particular form of hatred, as I will show you today. But they universalized it, right? Also, they universalized the Holocaust as well. The field of Holocaust studies has become comparative genocide studies, as we all know. Then came the 3D test, as you heard from Natan Sharansky, which was quite helpful and which informed IRA. You guys know what IRA is, right? We talked about this. Now, I actually don't teach using IRA at all. Initially, I did. And I actually don't think it's helpful, and we'll talk about that. So another resource is Facing History. Has anybody ever heard of that program, Facing History? Yes. So take a look at the way that they talk about anti-Semitism as part of racism. Again, universalizing the problem, the phenomenon of anti-Semitism, and widening it, broadening it, to kind of departicularize the story of the Jews, okay? Now I'm going to show you something, all right? These are students, and these are their responses. They had a program in a Jewish high school, and they learned something, and this is what they came out with. These were their, in the name, I will not be silent in the face of. I have a question for all of you. What do you think was the lesson? What did they learn that day?
It's okay to be silent about something.
So something about bystanders you're seeing?
No, these are things that you won't be silent for. There are other things you will be silent for.
Interesting, I never considered that. But what was the lesson? What?
An American understanding of anti-Semitism.
You think it was the American understanding of anti-Semitism? All right, yes. Yes. Yes, it was Remembering Kristallnacht. Absolutely.
These are Jewish students?
Yes. Okay. Okay, no, but that's important. These were their learning. This is what they learned after they spent a week in their schools learning about the Holocaust and Kristallnacht, which tells us what did they learn, okay? As I've been spending time with all of you here today and throughout the last few days, I've heard many of you talk about Jewish identity and how important it is to talk about Jewish identity when you address anti-Semitism. And I did actually personally don't know, I've never done it, but I changed my PowerPoint to include it because I work with a lot of parents. So in addition to teaching, I report on K through 12. I write in online publications on the issue of K through 12 anti-Semitism. So I have lots of parents who reach out to me. I'm going to share a letter from a parent. I'm going to read this out loud. This is at a public school in the state of New York. Okay, so the son received a 0 on the class presentation, okay? Mrs. Gordon, thank you for your inquiry regarding social grade. The project was for family customs related to ethnicity and roots. It's my understanding your husband is from Russia. It's also my understanding that you are from Asia, which is weird, okay? Why was the project religious and political when he could have chosen Russia or Asia? To add, the kids in the class feel that spoke often about being Jewish with excitement, but I'm not sure other parents would appreciate learning about the Wailing Wall or Jerusalem, as it doesn't really relate to customs. I could potentially add 10 points to the food section, as I've seen him in at lunch with what appears to be ethnic food he discussed in his slideshow. Do you understand what happened? This boy has parents from the former Soviet Union. The past project was to talk about your ethnic roots, and he decided to talk about Israel, because the Jewish people come from the land of Israel. And the teacher gave him a 0 and said, but I could add 10 points because I saw him eating falafels. Imagine if that was done to another group. You know, there's the Pan-African, and within the African-American community, the idea that the African continent is indigenous home. Unfortunately, these parents did not want to fight the school. They pulled the child out, and he's now in a Jewish school. But this is a teacher in America who he received a 0, right? So maybe we do have to teach about Jewish identity. When I teach about Jewish identity, I borrow from many different scholars, but what I talk about is this triangle. The triangle is religion, territory, religion, territory, language, or people, land, and Hashem, God. It's a triangle. You take one out, you deny 1/3 of my identity. It's about my identity, it's an assault on my identity, and that's just about it. Here are some data points, mostly from Pew, on how Jews self-identify. I know we have Yael, who loves data, in here. So I had that before you. No, but I mean, I think it's so important, you're right. Also, from 2019 to 2020, we have these important data points to show us how central Israel is to Jewish identity. And so, yeah, you'll have Jews who are anti-Zionists, but that doesn't really matter, because within the history of the Jewish people, we've had anti-Semitism within the Jewish community. In the Soviet Union, you had the Yevsekция, the Jewish section of the Communist Party. You had the Jewish anti-Zionists, and you had Hellenistic Jews. You know, this is not a new phenomenon of anti-Semitism from Jews. But it also, when we talk about Jewish identity, it's about reclaiming language as well, okay? It's about using the correct terminology, and I've heard so many Jewish people refer to this land using incorrect terminology. Well, I think it's incorrect, personally. Because, for instance, when you are saying East Jerusalem, you're signaling that the Jewish eternal capital may not really belong to the Jewish people. Right? These are consequences of this language. So now back to anti-Semitism. So after I was a participant like you in 2018, I came here to develop curriculum on anti-Semitism. And this is the syllabus that I created after participating in the ISGAP program. I was then at UCLA, and the title of my course was The Anatomy of Anti-Semitism from Ancient to Modern. And you see, I kind of did a very chronological approach. I began with what is anti-Semitism, how do we teach about it, like some methodologies, problems of definition, forms of anti-Semitism. That's when I used the hyphen back then in those days. I've evolved. And of course, topic 12 I included because I thought it was really important. And that was the problem for UCLA. They did not really want that. So I never really taught that at UCLA, and that's when I really pivoted from academia to working with high school students. But initially, I really relied on these tools, 3D IRA, to teach about anti-Semitism. All right, so I have a question for you. Do you think that this is anti-Semitism? Of course, Amy's, okay. Okay. Maybe somebody, maybe no, yes? Why is it anti-Semitism, if I may put you on the spot?
Yes, because it's putting the country of Israel with blood spattering. It's a child, so it's bringing up the sacrifice of children, and then of course the sorry.
Okay, beautiful. Everybody here is blood libel. Wonderful. So listen, I'm glad because in 2018, when I taught this, I had Jewish students who were telling me that this is not anti-Semitism, this is criticism of the IDF, and this is criticism of Israel. They were telling me this is not anti-Semitism, and I was quite disturbed because I'm like, well, how is it that they don't know? And I thought, oh, I'll teach them IRA. That didn't work. So I developed a completely different approach, which is what I'm going to be modeling for you today. So right now we're entering the demo lesson phase. Yes, sir? Because they said to me, you see, this is the hand of the IDF. This is this is probably really aggressive, or maybe it's a little bit extreme criticism, but they don't see any like Jewish symbols. They didn't see Jewish symbols, so then they thought, how could it be anti-Semitism? Yes, sir. Oh, so one sec. Yeah.
It's often interesting to put other examples where blood is used to criticize war and things like that, and then compare these cartoons against Israel to show what is different about them, despite the fact that blood may be even a more universal visual element in caricatures.
Good, and we're going to go there. We're going to go there. 1 second, all right? So here we are. I'm going to begin, and I'd like this quote to frame our discussion as we think through anti-Semitism. The Soviet Jewish writer wrote, "Show me what you accuse the Jews of, and I will tell you what you are guilty of." I want you to think about that as we go through this presentation. This is child abuse right here. There's an organization called PMW, Palestinian Media Watch. What are Jews accused of today? They're accused of power, genocide, colonialism, occupation, apartheid, ritualized murder, theft, right? Usurpers of land. I can't play this for you because it didn't work on this PowerPoint, but around 2017, if you recall, in Jerusalem, there was the short-lived knife intifada, where people were running around with knives and trying to attack IDF soldiers and policemen. And this little girl who, let me see if it'll, what do you say to Palestinian youth in the West Bank? An adult asks her, stab, 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 stab. Okay, this is abuse. I really think this is child abuse, what is happening to these young kids. You know, in Russia, little children memorize poetry of Pushkin and Lermontov. In America, we read Dr. Seuss, I guess. And in other parts of the world, this is what was done. And this is child abuse, is what I think. This innocent young girl, this probably doesn't understand what she's saying, really. But think about that. Tell me what you accuse the Jews of, and I shall tell you what you are guilty of. Speaking of genocide, I'm working on a project, side project. You know how there's Students for Justice in Palestine, right? There's now Faculty for Justice in Palestine chapters that were born after October 7th. So October 7th, Hamas massacres Israelis. October 27th, the IDF actually goes into Gaza. But we have, before that, at UC Berkeley, activity already of accusations of genocide. You have Critical Race and Ethnic Studies Department at UC Santa Cruz held an event titled The Genocide in Gaza in Our Classrooms, a Teaching Palestine Workshop. So Israel hadn't even had a chance to respond, and these genocide accusations started. It's really important to uncover that. UC Berkeley Bears for Palestine, this is on the day, on October 7th. It's like it was ready, prepared statement. It was ready, prepared. We honor Palestinians who are working on the ground on several axes. Notice the word glory appear many, many times throughout, glorifying this event. Israel hadn't had a chance yet to respond, you understand? This is October 7th. Again, with the, the accusations that Israel is a terrorist state. When what is October 7th but a terror attack against the Jewish people in Israel? A pogrom, massive. And I couldn't predict this. People ask me, I couldn't. How is it that after this you have this viral surge of anti-Semitism? 2,000% in California up after October 7th? Many of you who are sharing with me that you're afraid to teach about anti-Semitism in schools, in your universities. So let's begin with some language. How many of you have heard these terms? All of you, all right. And how many of you think that this is anti-Semitic? Some of these. And let's be honest, because I want to be honest too. How many of you, before October 7th, it may have not been this clear that it's anti-Semitic? Yes.
The Free Palestine thing is very, all of those, from my point of view,
Yes.
problematic. But the thing is, with Free Palestine, it's complicated when you try to convince somebody that it shouldn't be used.
Right, and I'm glad that you brought that up, but this is the weaponization of social justice language, the cloaking in the language of human rights that is being co-opted by this movement. Yes?
For me, it was anti-Semitic before October 7th, simply because it uses this collective guilt. And if you have any problems with Israel, you go to protest in front of Israeli embassy, but you don't dare to attack Jews in diaspora.
But you do.
Say that you are anti-Zionist, yet you attack Jews in diaspora, then I'm sorry, you are against yourself. If you are anti-Zionist, you should be glad that the Jews are staying in diaspora, right?
That's a very good point. That's a very good point. You make a very good point. And it's true. You see whenever the conflict erupts, who pays the price? It's unbelievable. Diaspora Jews are hunted down in synagogues and streets. So I have a question for you. When do you think anti-Semitism began? Oh, big question. Yeah, in the back.
I'm getting spam. I usually start with the Book of Esther. There's a people among us who won't assimilate and have their own holidays.
Okay, so remind me of your name again. Luce begins with the Book of Esther, with the people among us who won't assimilate. Yes. With Abraham. Wow, okay. Shai? Begins with Judaism. Okay, in the previous session, people said when Jews were slaves in Egypt, children of Bnei Israel were in Egypt, right? Which is, it's interesting because you are all very educated. Now, guess what? When I speak to students, what do you think they tell me? The Holocaust, right? I mean, we're getting better. People are maybe saying, oh, with Christianity, with the birth of Christianity. But the important thing is, if you are in this field and you're teaching, you need to be very aware of the work of Robert Wistrich, who called this the oldest hatred, the longest hatred. And that's really important as we continue to speak about this. Because the way that I conceptualize anti-Semitism is through these eras, 3 distinct eras. The era of anti-Judaism, the era of anti-Semitism, and today, the era of anti-Zionism. In each era, The Jew is seen as a violator. Who's afraid of the big bad Jew, remember? We are a villain. In each era, we are cast as violating the tenets that civilization holds dear and near. One student asked me, Dr. Lekht, if in 100 years we could predict what will be morally important, will we know what Jews will be accused of then? I was like, very smart student, right? But notice the mutation. This is Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks, who really brought to our attention this idea that this very misunderstood phenomenon of anti-Semitism is that it mutates. That's why, for instance, I understand the impetus for IRA, but I'm concerned because once you define, you codify things. And we need to be able to update because anti-Semitism updates. That's one of my concerns. So as you see, anti-Semitism, or I really say Jew hatred, really evolves through these 3 phases in Europe. And in each phase, the Jew is violating that which that society held to be their moral North Star. And our moral North Star today is human rights. So we are going to be the violators of human rights. That's just how it's going to be. So in the era of anti-Judaism, which is rooted in this idea that Jews are Christ killers, but what's the worst thing about Jews is they killed Christ, but even worse, they didn't get on the salvation train. They didn't accept Jesus Christ. We are known as a stiff-necked people, stubborn. And it's interesting because if you remember from Jonathan Spyer's lecture, when he spoke about Islam, he also said that within Islam, they also talked about Jews as being stubborn, right? Maybe we are stubborn. I don't know. We're difficult, right? We did not get on that salvation train. So the answer to anti-Judaism was de-Judaization, right? De-Judaization of Europe. Now, interestingly enough, in the era of anti-Judaism, you have a really important figure of Martin Luther, and he called the Jews a brood of vipers. Now, that's going to be important as we continue throughout. Jews as having a nest, as having a brood of vipers, a den of devils, thieves, robbers, they can't be trusted. And then there's this other phenomenon within Christianity of these 2, ecclesia and synagoga. How many of you are aware of this? Yes? So just really quickly, she represents the synagogue, Judaism, and she represents Christianity. You notice she's blind even though she's holding the Old Testimony, the Bible. She can't see, right? She's not been enlightened. And I kind of, in looking at the various texts from the medieval period, I decided to come up with a kind of a collection of terms, a taxonomy of terms of how Jews, how did people talk about Jews? Cunning, devils, blind, foolish, brood of vipers, serpents, traitors, robbers, and thieves. That's kind of in the era of anti-Judaism. And this is one of the earliest depictions that I found in actually it's earlier than that, of Jews. This is a Jew. He lived in England, in the town of Norwich, actually. And you see the devil has identified him, and he is consorting with the devil. This is one of the early depictions of Jews as having conspired with demons. There's a critical shift between the era of anti-Judaism and the era of anti-Semitism as it mutates. And that shift is very much informed by the Enlightenment, where the world is no longer understood as supernatural, but rather explained by natural phenomenon and science. And so the term anti-Semitism is brought about by Wilhelm Marr. And how many of you know this? Yes, perfect, amazing. I always ask my students the following. We just said that anti-Semitism is the longest hatred, so why create a new word? Why did he do that? Why would Wilhelm Marr do it? What do you think? Yes?
He wanted to create something that sounded more scientific.
Beautiful, thank you. He wanted to create something that sounded more scientific and, pardon my language, I'm going to use a little bit of an anachronistic term, something more progressive, right, that it could sell better. Because Judenhass, or anti-Judaism, he didn't accuse Jews of deicide. That's benighted, that's backward, right? He's a man of progress. He's enlightened. He's scientific about his anti-Semitism. And so the anti-Semitism was quite fashionable. And I'll tell you this, I'm going to deviate a bit and just tell, when I was in college and the people on the podium came to smear Israel, the first thing they would say is, I'm not an anti-Semite, I'm an anti-Zionist. Oh, I'm not an anti-Semite. I loathe anti-Semitism. This is a trope, rhetorical trope almost. Right? Yes.
What I've begun to realize is that if you start your conversation with I'm not an anti-Semite, the odds are like 99%.
You're going to be an anti-Semite. Right.
That-
Right, but yes, I understand. So I want to show you actually, so at the time, I understand this map is not really the 19th century, this is more Renaissance, but I'm trying to call to your attention the idea that Jews were really kicked out everywhere. From everywhere they were exiled, and this birth of the Jewish question, which is, in essence, what is the Jewish question? What to do with those Jews? What do you do with these people? They're so different, right? Now, the answers came in various forms through the French emancipation when Count de Tonnerre said famously, give to the Jews as a people, nothing, but as individuals, everything, which is very interesting. It came from Dostoevsky, we'll see, and of course it came in the form of the final solution, the answer to that Jewish question. But I also think Zionism answered the Jewish question in many ways. Wilhelm Marr. So he had an essay he wrote, The Victory of Judaism Over Germandom in 1879. I'm just going to call your attention to one of the lines. Yes, through the Jewish nation, Germany will become a world power, a Western New Palestine. What is he expressing here? Pardon? What is he? Through the Jewish nation, Germany will become a superpower and will be a Western New Palestine. What is he worried about? He's concerned about. He has anxiety with the Jews.
He was afraid that the Jewish emancipation in Germany after 1871, the Jews started to become quite successful in the German society. And he called this process of Jewish emancipation Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how he came to the term anti-Semitism. He wanted to stop this process of
Semitization of Germany. Very good. He's expressing a concern, but I love the fact that for the non-Jew, Palestine meant Jewish. My mother in the Soviet Union was told in Russian, "Пойдите обратно в Палестину," go back to Palestine. Because for the non-Jew, Palestine always signaled Jewish. For the non-Jew, Palestine always signaled Jewish. Now, why I put this here, you're like, what does Wilhelm Marr have to do with any of this? But remember this anxiety, and this is another interesting feature that Jonathan Spire called our attention to, that within the West and Christianity, there's, Jews are cunning, Jews are to be, but they're also to be afraid of. You must be afraid of them. They pose a threat and danger, whereas in Islam, that didn't come until the West came in. They didn't see the Jews as that. This is at least what I got from that lecture, which was very interesting difference. But you see, he was, as you pointed, very concerned with the Judaization of Germany, Semitization, as you say. Take a look at this cartoon from 2019 from the New York Times International Edition. Does anybody remember it? Okay, it was actually then afterwards they had to issue an apology. Now I ask my students, they say, oh, Dr. Lekht, you're so extreme. This is just political disagreement. This is a political cartoon about, the alliance between Bibi Netanyahu and Trump. I'm like, okay, well, let's see past that for just a second. Fine. It's dehumanizing. Bibi is a dog. He's rendered as a dog. It's dehumanizing the Jew. I said, yeah, but there's something else. What did Bibi do to Trump? What has he done to him? Yeah, and? Made him Jewish. He's Judaized him. Look at us. That's the power we have. He's Judaized him. That was that anxiety and fear about the Jews in the 19th century. I'm going to skip this. By the way, I found this amazing essay from Dostoevsky from 1877. The Jews, he says, oppressed or oppressor. Do you think you're using new language? He used it in Russia in 1877. Now, there's a history to that I'm not going to go into right now about Jews and their role in the Pale settlements as wealthy merchants selling alcohol, and he was concerned about inebriation of the Russians. different conversation. But these are examples of how people dealt with the Jewish question. So in these two eras of anti-Judaism and anti-Semitism, you've got these kind of bloodthirsty, cunning devils, brood of vipers, traitors, and in the era of anti-Semitism, you see racialization and nationalism as well, and then of course power comes in, all right? So in the era of anti-Semitism, what do you do with what's the answer to the Jewish question? I think it was answered with the attempted extermination, okay. So we are in the era of anti-Zionism. For me, it really doesn't matter what you call it. This is just how it mutates. But in these casting the Jew or the Zionist as a racist colonizer and denying our nationhood, by the way, well, the goal is to annihilate the Jewish country. So as you see, these are kind of the same idea of casting the Jew as a villain, blood libel, deicide, world domination, dehumanization. And today's language is language of human rights. So of course you saw this from Isabella's talk, from the anti-Zionist campaign in the Soviet Union, and that language also comes from the Soviet Union. So this was great. The ADL did this, I found this quite a few months ago, and they said, you know, there's this interesting correlation that the more tropes, anti-Jewish tropes, somebody buys into, the more likely that they're going to deny Zionists. The more likely they're going to be anti-Zionist. And I said, finally, somebody did the study that is so obvious. But it brought me to, this is what I developed after that 1 year where I think I failed in teaching that 1 year because they didn't think that stabbing by Israel was anti-Semitism. So I developed this. I said, okay, if anti-Semitism is a virus, as Rabbi Sachs said, what's its DNA sequence? If I could locate the DNA sequence of this anti-Semitic virus, what would it be? And I thought, well, why don't we treat these 6 accusations, these 6 tropes, and it doesn't really matter whether we're talking about Jews or Israel, it's the application of the trope. Blood libel. You rightly pointed to it. Here's a few examples of blood libel. I'm just going to go really quickly. This is from an UNRWA school material textbook from 2019. Okay? Notice it's always the iconography of the child, William of Norwich, Simon of Trent, a Palestinian child. Yes?
I have one time something. Sometimes the good indication is not even the blood, but the fact that it's an Orthodox Jew. Despite the fact that only very few Haredim are actually fighting in the IDF, but it's always the Orthodox Jew.
That's a very good point. That's actually a very good point. This year I taught Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, and Prioress's tale, our first foe, serpent Satan, who has made in the Jew's heart his wasp's nest. Notice, brood of vipers, wasps. This is from Canterbury Tales. It's an entire tale devoted to a Jew who kills a Christian boy. And so you have these kind of most vivid examples of blood libel in England, in Italy. And we heard from Jonathan Spire how it came into the Middle East, into the Muslim world in the 19th century. And of course, in Russia, we have the infamous Beilis affair of 1913. But you know what? We're back in the medieval ages, ladies and gentlemen, in many ways, because that's a very dominant trope today being used against Jews. We heard from Isabella about the doctor's plot in the Soviet Union, which I think is another form of blood libel. The accusation of Jews trying to kill non-Jews. And this idea of Jews are bloodthirsty, Jews are out to kill. Take a look at these beautiful. And here's the thing, and students challenge me, and I like the challenge. They say, but Naya, but Dr. Lekht, children are dying in the conflict. Can you deny that? Children are dying. And I say, okay. Well, can you find me a picture of Putin eating children? Or Assad?
Actually, Carlos Lacouf made some cartoons depicting Assad even as a vampire.
Okay.
But if this
the thing, so the issue is back to that blood libel of children. Now this is from the Nakba. This is a very famous cartoon that depicts the Nakba. I don't know if you see his blood is spilled. Do you see the shape? It's Israel, or as they would say, Palestine, killed by Israel. So this is a very dominant, and just so you know, this particular one came after October 7th in a Jordanian newspaper in January of 2024. This is in the UK, and this is in Australia. Jews kill kids. This one I heard from the other group that I spoke with is a very popular one making rounds. It's an older one, though. I'm not going to play this, sorry. Okay, the second one is world domination, that second sequence in the virus of anti-Semitism. We heard from Isabella the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, 1903, from the Russian Empire. Jews control the world. Now, why did I include Zionism as fascism and colonizers out of DC in a thing about Zionists control the world, about Jews control the world? Well, I believe that there's been a slight mutation of this obsession from world domination to power. Because what is colonialism if not power, right? It's another way to talk about that power dynamic. And so that is why I include that in the slide on world domination. It's this idea of, again, Jews have the power now. It's also sometimes couched in the language of privilege. Jews are privileged, Jews are white. Do you notice the snake? Remember the brood of vipers from Martin Luther? It's fascinating how things kind of stay. Zionism again in power. This is from an Arabic cartoon. The Pope says, peace on earth. He responds, the Jew devil, colonies on earth. This is from the Soviet Union, Zionism is Racism, a book from 1972. And this is Jews cast as Nazis. We've heard about this as well. Okay. This is from a march outside of DC, also after October 7th. Really after October 7th, where they didn't even have time yet. Notice Israel didn't go into Gaza yet. Notice that the python, this is a Soviet python, Soviet cartoon, the Israeli python and the American barrel. And the thing is, they think that they're being so very original, but they're really not. They're recycling. And okay, the third one is demonization. Now, this is why I don't think that anti-Semitism is like racism. It can have features, because demonization is the idea that Jews have these supernatural, superhuman powers. Right? Ilhan Omar tweeted, Israel has hypnotized the world, may Allah awaken the people, right? Just put in, instead of Israel, just say Jews. Jews have hypnotized the world. You'll understand. Now, people are like, well, why are you including all this in demonization? Well, in early Christianity, they really believed that we Jews consorted with the devil, that we really we were in cahoots with the devil. Now, I think that in 2024, if you ask an average person if there's Satan, I don't think they believe that, right? However, if you ask somebody, what's evil? What's evil? What would they say? Apartheid is evil. Nazism is evil. Racism is evil. So that's what you do now. You cast the Jew in that language. And people say, well, lady, I just want to be very clear. When you accuse Israel of apartheid, this isn't like, oh, let's sit around the circle and help Israel transition into a democracy. What do you do with an apartheid state? What? Dismantle. Amy has a, no. Go ahead, Amy.
No.
Tell me.
This is I can't stand, I don't like it when people just talk about dismantling.
Okay.
I don't like it when people talk about transitioning.
Okay.
I'm sorry, when Charles, you were doing anti-apartheid work, the argument was never to obliterate all white South Africans. It just wasn't. You had Mandela. It's very different. The solution is very different. It's not dismantling.
It's not. In this case, it's destroying. Yeah, so you understand, right. So when you do this when you engage in this demonization language, the goal is destruction. All right, and here are some, it doesn't really matter if we're talking about Jews from medieval times or Israel today, these same tropes are being applied. Dual loyalty, this accusation that Jews Where do their loyalties really lie? I dated really through the birth of the French emancipation when Count de Tonnerre said, "Give to the Jews as a people nothing, but to the Jewish individual everything," thus kind of bringing that wedge between the Jewish individual and the Jewish nation. And the thing is, the non-Jewish world is not wrong to perceive us as a nation, because we are. We are an Am Yisrael, a nation of Israel, a people. And some just cases from history were more relevant. At UCLA in 2014, the Rachel Beda case. She wanted to be in student senate. You remember this? Oh, wow, okay. And they asked her, given that you're Jewish and are very active in the Jewish community, how do you see yourself being able to maintain an unbiased view, especially when it comes to Israel? Now imagine any other minority and just substitute it, like about any other minority. Given that you are an African-American student, are very active, how do you envision yourself being able to maintain unbiased views when it comes to race relations? It's horrible. But it was done to this Jewish student. These are some more examples that I think are quite good from the AJC of dual loyalty. And this is the one, of course, that shares that in the DNA sequence dehumanization with racism, of course, where Jews are cast as the subhuman species. This is also Rat with Israel's star on it. This is from a Palestinian Media Watch. This says Zionism in Russian. And if you remember from Isabella's talk as well, this is the May Day parade with the Zionist spider. And of course, money. Jews and money. That's the sixth in the trope, in the DNA sequence of anti-Semitism. So once again, for me, when I teach about anti-Semitism, notice we didn't even do a definition. We said, what are the tropes and how are they being applied to Jews in Israel? Now, the other thing that I kind of was interested in mapping out, I was like, okay, I thought to myself, there are these three eras. Which accusations become more prominent? And I thought, I could be wrong. You could correct me. That's okay. Classroom is a laboratory. In the era of anti-Judaism, I thought the most prominent are blood libel and demonization. In the era of anti-Semitism, it's dehumanization, world domination, and dual loyalty. I didn't find many blood libel in the era of anti-Semitism, personally, but I could be wrong. But now, in the era of anti-Zionism, blood libel is returned. Yes?
One recent example would be just QAnon, right? It's an adoption of the blood libel into a current phenomenon.
You mean now?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
I mean, QAnon is basically...
QAnon, you mean?
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It's basically the idea that people secretly extracting something from children, innocent children, to gain eternal life, right?
Yes. Right. Or that IDF targets Palestinian children, harvests their organs. I don't know, have any of you heard of that one? Okay. Yes.
Also, like in Poland, during the Holocaust, the Catholic Church, they would still like talk to their congregants about blood libels, and there was a couple of pogroms in Poland after the war.
Yes.
where
Okay.
Jews were, so I think there was some,
Okay.
specifically in that country,
Okay.
was used.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I think that the last one, the anti-Zionism, encompasses all the negative things that have been said about anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism. So to me, that is the most evolved, though I don't say that in a positive way. It encompasses everything.
So all six of those accusations. Okay. Yes.
I only wanted to add to what my colleague already said about QAnon. Because QAnon is interesting, it would fall under the anti-Semitism, not under anti-Zionism.
Yes. Correct.
So
Old.
you have blood libel within anti-Semitism.
Okay.
But the idea of soldier and stuff, that would be anti-Zionism. So there you have your example.
Okay.
What he was that was what he was trying to say.
Okay.
Anti-Semites were actually not angry that the Jews would go to Palestine, oddly enough.
Okay. Well, I read. Okay. Yes.
During AIDS, I think we forget. The blood libel was used during AIDS. During the AIDS epidemic.
Okay. I didn't know this. Okay. So these are mapping them out. And for me, in the era of anti-Zionism, I find that these are, so through colonialist language, through power, demonization of Israel as an apartheid racist, and the blood libel of Israel. Yes, Gwen?
I was just going to say, I think dual loyalty is very much in charge that gets attached to the identity.
Okay, so maybe I'll revisit this, but great that you guys are thinking through with me how these tropes have been used. So I'm going to do a little experiment with you right now. This is Twitter. It's called what now? X, I think. I call it Twitter still. All right, so this is actually a few years old. This is not so recent. So I'm really sorry for the expletives. I'm not going to read it out loud. I'm just going to show it to you. And I'm going to ask you all if you think this is anti-Semitic. Every one of those. Yeah?
With the first sentence, I think there the context would matter. Depending, like, are we discussing Jewish publications, for the Jewish community publications, something like that?
Okay.
So here the context matter, but I understand who possibly said that and what was originally meant.
Correct. Well, I've kind of hoodwinked all of you a bit. They don't say that. None of them say that. The actual tweets are this. But it's an important methodology for me in getting across to you this mutation and this way that anti-Semitism now is being used to target Zionists in Israel, which means Jew. You know, my mother always told me, when they mean Zionist, they mean you. They understood the Soviet Jews. So here's the other phenomenon that I started to think about in all these words. This I collect a lot of pictures. I'm kind of like Professor Yotek. I do have a lot of. It was actually after I heard him in 2018, and I was here as a participant. I found that his teaching was helpful through the teaching of images. But I started collecting over the years many. So this is actually after. These are all pretty much after October 7th. This is a man in Harvard Square, and he has a Palestinian flag, and it says, "Final solution." Yeah. So these words, these sanitized, the sanitized language, these euphemisms for murder, for genocide. We've spoken a little bit in Dan Michman's lecture on the historiography of the Holocaust and Hannah Arendt. Hannah Arendt is a very important figure. And one thing that she had written about in her work on the Eichmann trial is that she said that anti-Semitism is, one of the unique features of it is that the end goal is always genocidal. It's exterminationist. It's not that they want to colonize, exile, enslave the Jew. They want to murder the Jew. It's very important to understand that phenomenon of anti-Semitism. And so the language, globalize the Intifada, by any means necessary. I mean, by any means necessary, it means by any means necessary. And if that means killing a baby, that means killing a baby. I just moved to Manhattan, and Manhattan is a city where you walk. And when you walk, you see things. And I have to tell, no, I mean, it's true. I was in LA where I'm driving. I don't really see much. So I'm walking. And there, the hostage posters? And one day I'm walking, and instead of saying hostage, it's a picture of baby Kfir. Do you know who I'm talking about, right? And it says colonizer. He's a colonizer. By any means necessary. Do you understand? Final solution. These now globalize the Intifada. A lot of young people don't even know what is an Intifada. No, what is Intifada? You're right, but let's go back.
Arabic means uprising.
What kind of uprising? Armed uprising.
First Intifada was rocks, it wasn't armed.
Actually, there were suicide attacks in the first Intifada with blowing up of buses.
I don't think that was considered part of Intifada.
Well, it was definitely the first Intifada. So what is Intifada? It's not standing with posters in front of the UN. It's by terror means. And it really saddens me personally and hurts me that people in the West are so easily duped by this, that they don't understand the dangers of this language. So as I wrap up, coming towards the end so we can have time to discuss, I always, when I teach about anti-Semitism, I always say, all right, so you accuse the Jews of ritualized murder of children, of wanting to dominate or colonize, of being demonic or of being evil. All these have consequences. When did Hitler come to power? 1933. When did they start to systematically murder Jews, would you say? Not Kristallnacht, nope. No, that's not the murder of Jews. When did they start to murder Jews?
September 1941.
1941. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm not good at math. 33 to 41 is 7 or 8? 8. Oh, right. Very good. 8 years. Why do I stress this? Because it took 8 years for Europe to be ready to dispense with the Jew, to exterminate the Jew. But it was done through these means, through these propaganda tools. That's how dangerous they are. So what you do, if somebody told me, if an alien descended from outer space and said, there is an evil, untrustworthy, and illegitimate people, I mean, I'm sorry, what do you do with that? You get rid of them. You deny their right to exist. And so I believe that we've moved from the era of the Jewish question to the Israel question. In the era of the Jewish question, what shall we do with the Jews? And now we're asking the Israel question. What shall we do with Israel? What do you think that answer is going to be? You understand. Look at the way, I just wanted to show you, this is from 19th century depictions of Jews, Yuds. This is the demon. Look at this at the UN. This is Hillel Neuer. This is so old even. Look at these condemnations against Israel, resolutions against Israel's like, look at that. From a total of 7, look how many Israel. So yeah, if you can convince the world that this place is violating all of these human rights, I don't know, if I was a logical person and cared about human rights, and the Hague, where they brought Israel for the charge of genocide, tell me what you accuse the Jews of, and I will tell you what you are guilty of. Keep that in mind, because October 7th, was the attempted genocide. And they said they would do it over and over and over. All right. So it leaves us with the who's afraid of the big bad Jew. What does this Jew represent? Hint, it's not the other, okay? When I was a young girl in middle school and high school, I went to Jewish day schools, and we always heard talks about anti-Semitism. It was like, Jews are scapegoats, Jews are the others, Jews are otherized, Jews are more. And I was like, I'm not satisfied with that answer. I was never really satisfied with that answer. And I've been thinking, I continue to think, why? Why the Jews? Why? Well, I think that we fulfill this role of being the villain. But then I have to ask why? Why do we need to be the villain? Do you think? I want you to think with me. Why do we need to be the villain? Why Jews? Why not?
Anti-Semitism is the most successful conspiracy theory in the history of the world.
Because Dr. Koldorf believes that anti-Semitism is the most successful conspiracy in the world.
I would say that when you are a dictator and you need some scapegoat, anti-Semitism is a neatly prepared toolbox that you can take immediately out of the drawer. Everything is prepared. You don't have to construct anything.
Okay, so it's a deflection. Deflect from what you. Okay, maybe you didn't say that.
I would not say that.
Okay. Okay. I'm just asking out loud with you. Why does the world need the Jew to be the yes?
As Jews, based on the history, have provided the ideas of rule and law, ethical society, civilization.
Very interesting. Can you expand a little bit more about that, please?
Sure. I mean, if we look at the development of ideas in the world, there is a starting point for the development of the idea of rule of law, with a shout out to Hammurabi, but it was mostly the Jews.
Hammurabi, yes.
Currently, most of the human population on the planet follows a Abrahamic religion based on core principles that come from Judaism, mostly through Islam and Christianity. It's core DNA for what we think of as human civilization and human development and human progress.
Okay, so as I'm thinking this through with you, wouldn't then you would think, my goodness, why would I cast the Jew then as a villain? If the Jew has birthed all these ideas, why then cast the Jew in the role of the villain?
Because if you're a revolutionary and then you want to disrupt everything and start from scratch, you need to start from this laments of humanity, as he said, and bring up with your new own moral codes. Hence, get rid of the old moral codes, get rid of the Jews.
So the Jew stands for a moral code, a moral set. It's something that you must get rid of in order to create a new world order. Is that what you're saying? Pardon?
It reminds you of your humanity.
It reminds you of your humanity? Okay.
Your human conscience.
Okay. Yes, sir.
You know, it's a perfect tool to legitimize whether it is a real or imagined conspiracy based on tradition.
Can you expand what you mean by
All
that,
right.
please?
Well, I expand. That means if you are a dictator or not a dictator, or you are in a position of power and facing some opponent, you know, using anti-Semitism could help you out because it can convince the other side. You know something? This is what's happening, and you have a whole tradition that goes back to hundreds of years, to centuries. So mainly the tradition has given power, has given legitimization, has given a lot of things for people, for regular people to say, oh yes, because we heard about it. And then they tell you things, and it's a conspiracy at the heart. So mainly you have a lot of things that conflict together. And this is what I say, whether it is real or imagined. It's conspiracy at the heart of it, you know, and it has a tradition, and sadly so, it has a tradition of anti-Judaism that became anti-Semitism.
Okay, I understand. I wanted the floor to the young lady.
I'm not sure if I'm thinking in the right track, but I think more in terms of like us being an abstraction to society, like in terms of the I think in terms of the panopticon and society is imprisoned by an unknown kind of like an unknown power or force of power that is like dominating or is ruling the system of the people that are in
You think people think this way, or you act like, is this how you're describing the world?
like an abstraction in a sense, because in the panopticon, we don't know who is in the position of power, and I feel like people don't know who we are, but we're still always in a position of power, no matter what. And
We being the Jews, you mean?
Yes.
Is it, you think that's how you're seen, or you actually?
I think we're not seen. I think that it's an abstraction. I'm just using like the metaphor of the panopticon.
Panopticon. Well, Foucault came back to us. That's great. Yeah. Yes.
I just want to refine our understanding of conspiracy for a minute.
Yep. Good.
And I could be wrong.
Mhm.
There are many conspiracies that are not necessarily anti-Semitic. But I just want to follow through. There are many conspiracy myths that aren't anti-Semitic. But all of anti-Semitism is conspiratorial.
Oh, it's like if all dogs have, that kind of logic. If all something dogs are black, you're saying that anti-Semitism ends up being conspiratorial.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So
Yes.
I have been thinking about this for a while now, and I find I get it. I'm not in disagreement, but I think that when you say that something is conspiratorial, in many ways you absolve the rational. You're saying it's not rational. Well, I think anti-Semitism is also very rational. Okay, it's great. Okay. I think that there are. I think that when Stalin saw, when Golda Meir came to Moscow, and thousands of Jews greeted her, and he had anxiety. And he thought to himself, I have a fifth column on my hands. Because, these Jews are supposed to be Marxists. They're supposed to transcend their national origins. What's going on there? Are his fears irrational?
To some degree.
You may, yes.
So when you have a minority in your country, you are always concerned about the fifth column. But when Jews lived in Germany, what kind of a fifth column were they? How many Jews were communists? So
Look at what Wilhelm Marr was saying. He was worried about that Germany would become a new Palestine.
12,000 of them were killed on the fields of World War I.
I understand what you're saying. It's irrational. I promised. Yes,
No
sir.
evidence that they are not loyal.
Okay. Yes.
So two things. One, it's easy to get to ChatGPT and see what ChatGPT gives us an answer. But it's not going to be an answer. So they say 6 things: historical religious conflicts, scapegoating, economic myths, nationalism and identity politics, political manipulation, and modern conspiracy theories. The problem I have with all of that is there doesn't explain why anti-Semitism exists in the world. And I don't think there's a good answer. And I think
I have an answer.
well, let me finish. I really don't think there's a good answer. And rather than focusing on that question, which I think is one we'd like to go to, and I was asked this by the Chancellor of the University of North Carolina, and he actually had the audacity to then say, well, do you think that has something to do with DEI? And I'm in a room full of people. And I said, well, you know, there may be some problems with DEI, but I'm not sure that really, and I don't want to go into that, is the answer for why anti-Semitism exists in the world.
Right.
And I said, I don't really think there's a great answer for it, but we all can agree on what's happening now and what we can do about it. And so I don't know if there's a good answer, honestly.
Okay. Yael, and then yes. Okay.
I think one of the interesting things that I'm observing in this conversation is it's a little bit split-tracked, right? There are some people who are addressing how is anti-Semitism used in the world as a tool? Like, what are the rational reasons for using anti-Semitism as a tool? And then other people seem to be answering the questions, why do people hold anti-Semitic beliefs? And so I wanted to just first highlight that because one can be very rational, the other is actually quite irrational. And the same ADL study that you picked up on before about the tropes has two things that were not mentioned here, but that have even higher correlation with having anti-Semitic beliefs, more above and beyond the tropes. And the two highest predictors in the United States right now, and from this past year of holding anti-Semitic beliefs, is one is belief in any other conspiracy theory is the biggest predictor, and the second is having social dominance orientation, which means believing in a binary view of the world. And so I say that because, just to highlight, I think we're talking about two things that are both important and true, but one is rational and the other is not rational.
Very good point. I know I kept that one out, but I know what you're referring to. Absolutely, yes. There was that correlation with conspiratorial view and social dominance. Absolutely, you're right. Yes.
You asked, what does the Jew represent? So I think it's a matter of controlling world power, the world economy, and that Jews can do anything. They make the determination about what will happen. I know, for example, when I lobbied at the UN for a Jewish organization about Israeli policy, and met with the Indian ambassador. He knew I was Jewish, and the first thing he asked me is, can you do something about, I mean, it's just so ridiculous. Can I do something about another country which shall remain nameless? And I said, well, what exactly do you want me to do? He said, well, you know that Jews have power, just wipe it off the map. And I was so stunned that in modern day and age, someone who had the position of an ambassador thought that Jews could just completely eliminate a country off the map.
May I just, I'm almost at the end, so we could have, I don't know how much time, I'm not even aware. Okay, really quickly. I've been thinking about this and thinking about it for a long time, and I'm still formulating my own ideas, and I'm grateful to you all, really. I've been thinking about these 6 tropes, these 6 accusations, and I think that in many ways the anti-Semitism forges a permission slip for the crimes to be committed against the Jews. These accusations are actually what these other people are doing to the Jews, but in many ways it becomes a permission slip to do, a moral permission slip to do this to the Jewish people. And it brings me to that, what do you accuse the Jews of? And I shall tell you what you are guilty of. I also think that when you cast the Jew as the villain, in whatever context, whether you're in the anti-Judaism, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism era, when you are fighting the Jew, you have a purpose, and man needs purpose. We knew this from, my God, the Holocaust survivor, his name, Viktor Frankl, man's search for meaning. And finally, I think that anti-Semitism exists as an alarm clock to be set off to tell you that there's something really dangerous. I mean, I know I'm tired of dying for the world. I'm tired of being the canary in the coal mine. I am. We the Jewish people. But I want to show you a video from Chicago after October 7th. This is in the United States of America. We heard yesterday from Professor Uzi Rabi, Mark Bar. Remember what that means? Death too. If it's gonna get really loud, I'm really sorry. Uh-oh.
Mar bar Israel. Mar bar Israel. Mar bar Israel. Mar bar Israel. Mar bar Israel.
Just wait for it.
Thank you.
Hold on. Watch this.
So, it has two meanings, depending on who's asking.
Depending on who's
It
asking.
can mean death to or down with. So, can we get a Mark bar America? We can get a Mark bar America. Yes, we can. Mark bar America. Mark bar America.
Yeah. And the cloaking of our statues in the United States of America, and I'm sure it's happening in Europe as well, the targeting of these statues is also a form of threat to our democracy. And so when you're dealing with anti-Semitism, it may not be the most satisfying philosophical answer, but I say we must take it so seriously because it really signals, the anti-Semitism signals a much more dire threat to other. Yes, Amy.
When he said there are two answers.
So, yeah. It's so, there are two answers. He says, they ask him, what does Makbar mean? He goes, well, it has two answers and it depends who's asking. Do you know what that means? That means to us, we're going to say death to. But to the West, we're going to say, what was the other one? Down with. Yes.
Actually, something very typical, I would say, for also the Palestinian, for example, rhetoric, this intentional ambiguity, and I have addressed that in some other session. For example, they say down with occupation or end occupation. The Westerners think that it's occupation of the West Bank, but they actually mean occupation Tel Aviv.
I understand.
And I have also said that there is a legal dimension to this, because in some countries, incitement to violence is a crime, so it allows you to hide behind the in dubio pro reo legal doctrine, which means that any doubt must be interpreted in the favor of the accused. Mm-hmm. It's like when neo-Nazi says, well, I wasn't making Sieg Heil, I was just waving to a friend.
Right, exactly. That's very interesting. So as we, this is the last, as we wrap up, when we think about educating about anti-Semitism, I don't know, should Jewish identity, I brought it in because I've heard it in conversations, so I brought it in. And I wanted to show you that letter from that teacher who gave her, I also don't, notice I didn't use IRA or 3D. I don't. I actually developed this kind of virus, 6 accusations being the DNA sequence, and just follow the tropes. Just look at the tropes.
Quick question. I just want to say there's this notion of takia, which is a judicial term that you're obligated to lie following the benefit of Islam.
We can't hear you.
There's this notion in Islamic judicial term called takia, which means that in Sharia you're obligated to lie to promote Islam. So it's ethical. It's ethical. Pardon?
In English, it's called dissimulation.
Takia. Takia or Takia. I'm not, I do not speak Arabic. So this is how I developed this approach to teaching, is through the lens of these tropes and showing these tropes applied throughout different times, but also, for us, asking the more, deeper questions of why, because somebody asked me, I was at a roundtable discussion with educators hosted through the AJC, and somebody said, but why should we teach about anti-Semitism? And I thought, what kind of question is that? But then I'm like, well, that's actually an important question, because the truth of the matter is, and you may disagree with me, so this is just I don't think that we can eradicate anti-Semitism. I think that it's eternal. I think that as long as the Jew exists, there will be anti-Semitism. So then what's to combat it, to eradicate it, to end it? What's the purpose? I'm gonna end there with that question. I'm gonna ask you to join me in a conversation, a question. Yes?
I have a specific question, because I've thought about it a lot, about educating Jewish children about anti-Semitism, which is what you do.
Yes.
So I think that from personal experience of having them and also talking to other Jewish kids, that they really don't know much.
They don't.
They don't know their Jewish history. They're just, especially in a dual curriculum school, there's just no time in the day, and it's not given prominence. And I guess my question is, and I know it's important, so I want to preface it with that. I'm not challenging you on why we should do it. I'm curious on why you think it's important to educate. Like, if we're going to a Jewish school and saying, take time out of your day, you should do this, because it's usually, even Holocaust studies, this kind of stuff, in most Jewish schools, it's a club, right?
Mhm.
It's not usually, Ramaz is unique, I think, in some
Well,
ways.
it's only because of after October 7th.
Right, okay, so there you go.
It was after October 7th that there's initiatives now. And I talked about this in our first workshop. I don't think you were with me, but the burgeoning of 1-hour workshops on anti-Semitism it's everywhere now, especially after October 7th. Yeah.
I think, I don't know, you said you grew up in day school, so I did as well, and I would say that growing up, there was this idea of anti-Semitism, which existed in the past, or the Holocaust, and Israel. And if we experience anti-Semitism now, which I would say in the 80s, it was different than now, we had Israel. And now what I think a lot of the children are seeing is there's this concept of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism, and it's all mixed together, and everybody's confused. And Israel is also it's also anti-Semitism in Israel and anti-Zionism in America. They're not separate anymore. And I'm just curious about your thoughts. Why, if I'm going to a principal of a 12, and I say go high school, why are they Jewish high school? From the whole gamut of from Reform to Orthodox, why should they give me time to do this?
First of all, it's such an uphill battle. I couldn't get my curriculum in many Jewish day schools because the answer was we have a robust Holocaust program. Why do we need a history of anti-Semitism? I'm going to answer you with the answer that I got a few years ago from the head of the Bureau of Jewish Education in North America. I had a meeting with him. And he looked at my syllabus that I created from ISGAP. He goes, this is a phenomenal syllabus. This is great. No Jewish school is going to take it. I said, why? He said, because the Jews in North America made this kind of contract, silent contract, that after the Holocaust, we are going to be celebrating. We are not going to be talking about our sad state. And Jewish day schools, they are not going to talk about anti-Semitism after the Holocaust. They're going to teach, and it's going to, but I'm like, but that's just not reality. Because anti-Semitism, as we know, exists post the Holocaust. So that was one uphill battle, is that Jewish day schools did not want to contribute to Jewish identity being linked to anti-Semitism. They thought that that would erode rather than bring pride. You could understand that logic, right? But it's the way you teach about anti-Semitism. It is part of our history. But, and that's why Zionism is so amazing, because Zionism is that, Zionism is also the answer to the Jewish question. Zionism, I said it before, I'll say it again, it's the return of the Jewish people to history. It's the story of Jewish resilience, right? But today, today. After October 7th, it's been a lot easier to ask schools because they understand now that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. So in that roundtable discussion, what I heard from many schools, these are in the tri-state, is that how we say it? In tri-state, I'm still new to the East Coast. In the tri-state area, they said to me, to each other, before October 7th, we didn't understand that anti-Zionism was anti-Semitism, and now we understand. Since 2002, I've been ringing these alarms about anti-Zionism as anti-Semitism. I met Shai at a conference years ago. We both actually did our dissertation on the same topic, and you told me that I was one of those early people telling you, and you thought, yes?
You're too radical.
I was too radical, right? But, huh? Thought, yes. But it's much easier right now because you say you're preparing them for college, the way that you're going to teach about anti-Semitism, you're going to give them tools. But we could talk more about how to talk to school administrators. It's not easy. It's not easy because some of them are still so very stubborn. And they still hold to these old models of, we'll teach about the Holocaust and we'll be okay. Oh, they don't, okay, right. Yes?
I want to go back for a second on our discussion of origin of anti-Semitism and the conspiracy theory. So I agree that it's related, but I think maybe there is also it comes to the coming together in front of internal or external opponent. I think maybe there is also another simple thing. I think it's just being envious of Jewish people. Like I was thinking about when you spoke about Hammurabi and the law. And we are forgetting one thing, that Jewish people are or goyim in the way that we see ourselves.
Or the goyim means light unto the nations.
So I was just thinking about something, right? Jewish people tend to be more smart. Jewish people started with I'm looking at the correlation and
I have so many dumb friends.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to apologize for being smart and having a Nobel Prize. Or started with social they started with social laws. The idea of a community. We started with healthcare and how do you call it? To be clean and wash your hands. Sanitary. With legal issues, as my colleague.
Moral, ethical monotheism. They brought ethical monotheism to the world.
Israel also, it's a story of success. We can look at it as we want, but Israel was not the same state that it is 80 years ago, and it is a model of Jewish success eventually. And I think it's just easier to look at it that way. That there are envious. Even if I understand also the argument that Charles made of the marginalized people. I understand it completely in a different causal mechanism. People are marginalized. They don't have the welfare that others want. They want to be like them. It's very easy for people to abuse it or to change it and say, because they took it from you. Or social justice, so we need to take it from them. Right? I understand this. But eventually I think it's really another argument, just envious of Jewish people. That's it.
Okay, I promise Shai, and then you. Yes.
So I think so far we talked about the external view of the Jews, but there is also a Jewish internal view of anti-Semitism. And I think that the Torah, if I may bring up the Torah perspective.
The Old Testament as the Torah.
Well, I would actually say that it's not only in the Torah, but it's also in the Mishnah. There's acceptance of it and recognition that until the Messiah comes,
Amalek.
Not just Amalek. I think that the idea is that there is a midrash that says that when that the Torah was given at Sinai, and Sinai rhymes with the word sin'ah. Sinai means Sinai, sin'ah means hatred. And that once the Jewish people received the Torah, the goal in a way is to push humanity towards a loftier, higher position. But that creates the envy, and that creates the resentment. And in Judaism, there is acceptance of it. So that also, I think, implies that we don't fight it in order to eradicate it. Rather that we wrestle with it. We have to engage in it.
Very nice. So I always say the Jew is like a mirror. The Jew, it's a mirror, and you see all the things that are wrong with you. And the Jew basically reminds you of this ethical mandates. Yes.
I just was saying, I'm not trying to justify hatred in any way. There's nothing good about it. But what Shai was saying, you know, especially in the United States, this explosion of anti-Semitism, one part of this is we were worried about young Israelis, whether they're going to be fighting in the war. They've returned at numbers that exceeded any expectation. If you speak to rabbis across North America and Europe, young Jewish people are coming with pride. They're coming to shul. They're wearing Magen Davids and mezuzot. So there's something happening. There is a reconnecting to our wisdom, to our culture, to our community. And it's something that should not be underestimated, and we're not focusing on that. So there's the young generation is really, they have pride, they're returning. There's something positive in this mess.
Yes, well, anti-Semitism is that force and agent sometimes. I did promise, yes.
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to ask about IRA definition.
Yes.
How applicable is it in the US? Because I don't know much about the US, but as you know, in Europe it's really used in the level of the governments. But I don't know how it works in the US, if it's applicable to your work.
My work as a teacher, you mean, as in education? Let me leave the education space behind in terms of being a teacher and talk about my covering issues. It's important. So we have a real big problem of anti-Semitism in higher education as well as in K through 12. And a lot of lawmakers, a lot of advocates believe that if you pass IRA, which is it's a non-binding definition, and it's a working definition, but legally, what does that really mean to pass? So then it becomes a legal question. So for instance, with many of the grassroots families that I work with and some organizations, they think, well, if the District of Oakland, for instance, in California will pass the IRA definition, it's met with a lot of opposition because they think that IRA is a tool to silence criticism of Israel. Okay, so it has become hijacked, and it becomes part of this now battle about the freedom of speech in the United States of America. I don't know how it is in Europe, in the context of Europe, could be an interesting conversation. So let me tell you this though, I've had students who I've worked with who've passed on their student level in Senate IRA. It means, I'm sorry to say, it means nothing. Then they have BDS, and they go, oh, you violated my IRA. So what? It's not binding. They violated IRA. There's nothing to violate because it's a non-binding, it's not a law. It's a definition. So it's a problem in that sense. But I think that's how I'm really looking at it from the perspective of education and how is it really helping. The other thing with IRA, and I've said this before, is that I think it limits our understanding of anti-Semitism to this definition, and not. You have to understand, it's such a misunderstood hatred, such a complex form of hatred that evolves. But I would love to hear how successful it's been in Europe. That's a really interesting. I'm not as well aware of that. Yael, yeah.
History in the United States, the first Judaic Studies Department in the U.S. at Columbia. But his concept, which he implored, and kind of, you know, as the father of Jewish, academic Jewish history in the U.S., was to fight against what he called the lachrymose conception of Jewish history. This idea, this teleological idea, that all of Jewish history ends in this lachrymose
than happy to continue. Thank you so much.